My girlfriend deceived me that she was pregnant in order to save our relationship after a long pause, which she suggested. Later I found out that she had a lover, so I took revenge on her. I had been in a relationship with this girl for years. It wasn't perfect, but it was steady, until it wasn't. Somewhere along the line, things started feeling off. She got distant, stopped texting as much, and would cancel plans with excuses that didn't add up. I didn't push her on it at first because I figured she was just stressed or something. But then she hit me with the big one. She wanted a break. She said it was to figure herself out, and that we'd get back together after a month. I wasn't thrilled, but I agreed. I thought a month apart might clear the air. That was my first mistake, thinking she was being straight with me. The break started simple enough. We didn't talk, didn't text, didn't see each other. I kept myself busy with work and friends, trying not to overthink it. A month isn't that long, right? But then the 1-month mark came and went, and she didn't reach out. No call, no message, nothing. I didn't chase her either. I'm not the type to beg. Weeks turned into months, and by the 4-month mark, I was done. Whatever feelings I had for her were gone. I'd moved on in my head, written her off as a part of my past. That's when she decided to show up again, acting like everything was fine. So there I was, for months into this so-called break, and I'd finally gotten her out of my system. I wasn't sitting around pining for her anymore. I'd gone out with friends, picked up some new hobbies, and honestly felt better than I had in a while. Then one random Tuesday, she shows up at my place. No warning, no text, just her standing at my door with this casual look on her face like she hadn't ghosted me for a third of a year. She walked in, started talking about how she missed me and how she was ready to pick things back up. I couldn't believe the nerve. After all that time, she thought she could just waltz back and like nothing happened. I shut it down fast. I told her she was too late, that I wasn't interested anymore. The look on her face when I said that, she went pale, like she couldn't process it. I think she expected me to be waiting around, ready to take her back the second she snapped her fingers. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I'd had 4 months to think, and the more I thought about it, the more I was sure this whole break thing was just a cover. She'd been messing around with someone else, and it dragged on longer than she planned. That's why she disappeared for so long. I didn't have proof, but it made too much sense. She didn't deny it either, not at first, she just stood there, stunned. Her shock didn't last long. She snapped out of it, and started scrambling to turn things around. She hit me with this wild story. She said she'd gotten pregnant by me right before the break. According to her, that's why she needed the time apart, to process it, and figure out how to tell me. I wasn't buying it for a second. 4 months pregnant? She didn't have a belly, no signs of anything like that. I pointed it out, told her flat out that her story didn't add up. She looked panicked for a moment, then reached into her bag and pulled out a pregnancy test. A positive one. She held it up like it was some kind of trump card, proof I couldn't argue with. I wasn't impressed. I told her normal people don't carry around pregnancy tests months later just to whip them out in an argument. It was too convenient. She obviously brought it with her as a backup plan, something to guilt me into taking her back if I didn't fall for her first pitch. I wasn't in the mood for games. I told her if she wanted any chance at fixing this, she'd have to come clean about what really happened during those 4 months. No more lies, no more excuses, just the truth. She hesitated, which only made me more sure I was right. Then she caved and admitted it. The break was about another guy. Just like I thought. Her admission didn't hit me as hard as she probably expected. I'd already pieced it together in my head over those 4 months, so when she finally said it out loud, it was more like confirmation than a gut punch. She spilled the whole thing. How she'd met this guy a few weeks before suggesting the break. How she'd been seeing him the entire time she was supposed to be figuring herself out. The original plan was to mess around for a month and come back to me like nothing happened, but apparently this dude had her hooked longer than she anticipated. That's why the break stretched out to 4 months. She didn't say it outright, but I could tell she only showed up at my door because things with him fell apart. I was her fallback option, the safe bet she could crawl back to when her fling went south. She tried to soften it, of course. She said it wasn't serious with the other guy, that she'd been confused and made a mistake, and that she realized now I was the one she really wanted. The pregnancy lie was her last-ditch effort to lock me in. She thought if I believed there was a kid involved, I'd feel obligated to stick around. I asked her point-blank if she was actually pregnant, and she dodged the question, mumbling something about how she thought she was at one point but wasn't sure anymore. It was nonsense. She didn't have a test from months ago. She probably bought it that morning and faked the whole thing. I didn't even bother calling her out on that part. I just let her keep talking, digging herself deeper. The more she went on, the clearer it got how little she respected me. She didn't care about what I'd been through those 4 months, how I'd spent that time getting over her. To her, I was just a guy she could string along, someone who'd always be there waiting. It pissed me off, but not in a loud, yelling kind of way. It was colder than that, like I was done wasting energy on her. I told her I wasn't taking her back, plain and simple. She got mad then, accused me of leading her on by making her confess. She said I'd promised to forgive her if she told the truth. I didn't remember promising anything, I just said I'd consider it if she was honest. Either way, I wasn't bound by some imaginary deal. She'd lied to me for months. I figured one little twist of my own was fair play. I stood there, watching her face twist up with anger and desperation. She wasn't used to me pushing back like this. I'd always been the reasonable one, the guy who'd let stuff slide to keep the peace. Not this time. I told her to leave, and she didn't move at first, like she thought I'd cave if she stayed long enough. When she realized I wasn't budging, she grabbed her bag and stormed out, muttering something about how I'd regret it. The door slammed behind her, and that was it. I didn't feel relieved or victorious, just tired. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't done yet. She'd played me for a fool, and I wasn't going to let it end there without some kind of payback. After she left, I sat on my couch for a while, just staring at the wall. The whole thing felt surreal, like I'd been living with a version of her in my head that didn't match the real person who just walked out. I wasn't heartbroken anymore, that part had faded months ago. What I felt now was more like disgust, mixed with this nagging itch to do something about it. She'd spent 4 months screwing around, then showed up with a fake pregnancy story to trick me into taking her back. And when that didn't work, she tried flipping it on me like I was the bad guy. It was messed up, and the more I thought about it, the more I wanted her to feel some of what she'd put me through. I didn't have a plan right away. I'm not some mastermind who cooks up revenge plots on the spot. But I knew her well enough to know what mattered to her. She cared about how people saw her, always posting perfect little updates online about her life, her job, her deep thoughts. That was her thing, looking good to everyone else. I figured that was where I'd hit her. Not in some big, dramatic way, but something subtle that'd stick with her longer than a screaming match ever would. I started thinking about all the stuff I knew, the little details she'd let slip over the years that she wouldn't want out there. There was this one thing she told me early in our relationship, back when she still trusted me. She'd hooked up with her boss a few years ago to get a promotion at her job. She swore me to secrecy, said it'd ruin her if anyone found out. At the time, I didn't care. I wasn't going to judge her past. But now, that little secret felt like gold. I didn't have proof, no texts or emails, just her word against mine. Still, I knew her well enough to guess she'd freak out if it ever got back to her coworkers. I wasn't going to call her boss or anything crazy like that. I'm not trying to get sued. But I could plant the seed, let it spread on its own. That's when I started working out how to pull it off without it coming back to me. The next couple of days, I kept it low-key while I figured out the details. I wasn't about to go full psycho and start blasting her secrets everywhere. That's not my style. I wanted something quieter, something that'd hit her where it hurt without me having to get my hands too dirty. She worked at this mid-sized marketing firm, one of those places where everyone knows each other and gossip spreads fast. I remembered she'd always talked about how tight-knit her team was, how they'd all go out for drinks after work and share everything. That was my in. I didn't need to tell the whole world about her and her boss, just the right people. I created a throwaway email account, nothing tied to my name or my usual stuff. Took me about 5 minutes to set it up. Then I drafted a message, short, vague, but enough to get tongues wagging. I wrote something like, "Heard a rumor about someone at her company sleeping their way to a promotion a while back. Anyone know if it's true?" I didn't name her, didn't mention the boss, just left it dangling. I sent it to a couple of her coworkers whose emails I'd seen pop up on her phone over the years. She was sloppy about leaving her screen unlocked when we were together. I picked 2 people I knew she was close with, the kind who'd run with a juicy hint like that. Then I hit send and waited. I didn't expect an instant explosion or anything. Gossip takes time to simmer. But I knew her office well enough to bet that within a week, someone would start asking questions. She'd hear about it eventually, maybe not the exact email, but whispers about someone climbing the ladder the shady way. She'd know it was about her. She told me herself how paranoid she was about that story getting out, how it'd tank her reputation at work. Even if no one could prove it, the suspicion would eat at her. That was the point, not to destroy her life, just to make her sweat like she'd made me sweat those 4 months. A few days later, I got my first sign it was working. She texted me out of the blue, nothing big, just a random, "Hey, how you doing?" I didn't respond. I knew her too well, she wasn't checking in because she cared. Something was up. I figured the email had started doing its job, and she was fishing to see if I'd say anything incriminating. Maybe she suspected I was behind it, maybe not, either way, I wasn't giving her the satisfaction of a reply. I let her sit with it. Over the next week, I heard through a mutual friend that she'd been acting weird lately, snapping at people and looking stressed. The friend didn't know why, just said she seemed off. I kept my mouth shut and nodded along. I didn't stop there though. One email wasn't enough to really stick the knife in. She was obsessed with her online image too, always posting these curated pics and captions on Instagram like her life was some inspirational movie. I decided to mess with that next. I made a fake account, random name, no profile pic, nothing traceable. I started leaving comments on her posts, nothing too obvious at first. Stuff like, "Looks like everything's perfect now, huh?" Or, "But there's a story behind this one." Harmless on their own, but I knew she'd overthink them. She was the type to read into every little thing, especially if she was already on edge from the work rumors. She didn't block the account right away, which told me she was rattled but didn't want to look like she was. I kept it up, dropping a comment every few days. Then I took it a step further, sent her a DM from the fake profile saying, "Heard you've got some secrets catching up with you." That one was riskier, but I kept it vague enough that she couldn't pin it on me. She didn't reply, but I saw she stopped posting as much after that. Her usual flood of updates slowed to a trickle. I didn't know if it was the work gossip, the comments, or both, but she was definitely feeling the heat. It wasn't some grand revenge scheme, just enough to make her squirm, to remind her she didn't get to lie to me and walk away clean.